think the thing I'm trying to do most is learning how to tell stories.
The concept of telling a story is really deeply embedded in you.
I've always had very big dreams, but it's always been attached to movies. I feel like I've been placed here to make movies.
Do you have what it takes in order to help them reach that vision? Do you have what it takes to keep them engaged and motivated and challenged?
My friend looks at me and he goes, like, I know things suck right now, but you can't see the full picture. Only God can see the full picture. I think that's something to always remember, that you don't know why things are happening to you, but you can either believe that the world is against you, or you can believe that something will come of this.
This is my conversation with Nicolas Munoz. If you enjoy the Jeffrey van Leeuwen podcast, please consider subscribing or following the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast and YouTube. Leaving a comment or a positive review is also a great way to help out. And with that out of the way, here's my conversation with Nicolas Munoz. Nick, great to see you. Thanks for coming on. How are you doing?
Doing good. How about you?
Yeah, pretty decent. Pretty decent. Curious to see where this conversation is going to take us. Why did you want to come on the conversation? What would you like to discuss today?
I think we'll get into all sorts of things. I'm just always looking for opportunities to talk and to learn how to be a better public speaker, learning how to share ideas properly and how to find the right words for them. And I was kind of hoping we could talk about biographies later, because I'm a big fan of biographies, and whenever I get the chance to teach about some of the great people in history, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Napoleon, Julius Caesar, even like really back then, even Cleopatra to a certain extent. I love the opportunity to talk about these people and sharing their stories.
Okay, what specifically about the public speaking thing interests you? Why do you want to get better at that?
Public speaking, it's one of the most important skills that you can have, and it's weird because most people in society don't practice it on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. And it's a skill that you have to practice to get better at. So like I'm sure with podcasting, you're talking a lot, and every episode you get better because you're in constant practice. And there's actually a story when Cleopatra was young, they had her do all sorts of studies, and she actually had like a linguistic coach, and this coach would tell her all sorts of things: when to pause, when to look up, when to look at the audience, when to look at her notes, how exactly to use certain pitches to motivate people to do certain things. And then Cleopatra was one of the best, most influential figures during that time, and led one of the biggest empires in human history. So I think it's really surprising that most people don't practice how to talk. They don't practice this art of speaking, this art of choosing the right words. And I think it's something extremely valuable that hopefully over time I'll get better at and have.
And why do you think it's valuable? Why do you think people should practice public speaking or communication in general?
It's really good, and it's really good for everything. I mean, every field you want to be able to communicate your ideas properly, because everyone is creative to a certain extent. Everyone has these ideas in their head, and the only way to put it out into the world, it's by speaking. So I'm Christian, and like the beginning of Genesis is it says God like spoke the world into existence, and like we do the same thing. We with our thoughts we speak, and the more clearly you're able to articulate things, the more clearly you're going to be able to get an idea across and bring it into reality. So you get that as a side effect.
Yeah, it's also the way that humans share experiences. The whole idea of that we all live inside a story, and the way that if we can articulate our experiences properly to others, that means we can share our experience with others, and therefore learn from each other's mistakes and see the world through each other's eyes,
Right.
which is an absolutely beautiful thing about communication. I definitely agree. It's also where the whole concept of really listening to people comes from. Which is the other side of the communication part. It's not just about the talking; it's also about the listening and about the understanding and about the summarizing of someone else's standpoint, just to be sure that you are on the same level as them, you're facing the same direction as them.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's we're sending coded messages into the world and then we're receiving them
Hmm.
back and these concepts are like it's so interesting because it's just these back and forth of receiving messages and the more clearly the better you are at public speaking or just speaking in general, the more clearly that message is going to be to the other person. It's like you send a photo at someone but it's all blurry rather than sending a photo to someone and it's like 4K pristine crystal image. That's kind of how I would describe it.
Right. So what have you done in terms of public speaking up until this moment? So either professionally or personally, what is your experience with it, and where do you stand now as a on that front?
Yeah, I actually don't have much experience with it.
Hmm.
It's one of my goals for this year, 2025, because I just started a marketing company and I know I'm gonna have to pitch to venture capitalists and then other business owners as well to sell my product. And so it's a skill I'm looking to do a lot this year. One of the reasons I wanted to be on the podcast. And then I know in a couple weeks I'm going to be presenting to a lot of business owners and pitch my business to them. Um, and it's going to be like a big presentation and everything. So uh, definitely a skill I'm looking to get better at. As in the past, I have a YouTube channel where I talk about history's greatest founders, entrepreneurs, just people that are the exception. And that's forced me to talk into the camera a lot, and that's a lot different. So that's mostly where my past in public speaking. It's not really public, but I know in the future I'm going to be giving lectures and I'm going to have to pitch to a lot of business owners and venture capitalists. So that'll be a lot of speaking there.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. So that's very good motivation to become better at speaking in general. So you can become more effective with your marketing business to pitch your products or to communicate with them or to get partners or something like that. Um, Fair enough. So what would you say is the thing right now that you struggle most with? Is it like the articulation part? Is it like the laying out a coherent story part? Is it the listening element of it? What specifically are you focusing on at the moment, or is it everything at once? And how do you think? Because you mentioned that one of the reasons that you wanted to come on this podcast was to improve that part. How do you link these two together? How do you think this podcast will help you get better at public speaking?
Yeah, I'm always conscious. I always try to be conscious of everything I do. So how you get better at something is obviously practice and repetition, and then taking notes, and then going back and continuing to practice. I think the thing I'm trying to do most is learning how to tell stories, but in a way that's not um, a production. So where you're just
Hmm.
having face-to-face conversations with someone, but you're guiding the conversation in a way that's in the way of a story where you're laying out a point and then you're continuing on this path to the point and you clash with the other person a little bit, but at the end of the day you get to this like epiphany and you both kind of have these epiphanies of what the other person is saying and it comes to something meaningful and constructive. Um, so if you can get that story element to what you're saying, you connect with someone deeply because everyone connects with stories, and that's what I'm
Hmm.
always trying to get better at. I'm a storyteller at heart, and I mean I want to go into movies in the future. Stories is what I love. It's what I want to do, and yeah, speaking is just the start of that.
Where does that love come from? Is it something that you always have done, storytelling, even as a kid? Did you, for example, write short stories or fantasize a lot, or you know, tell these creepy stories around a campfire or something like that? Where does that love come from? You think?
Um, I've always loved movies. Um,
Hmm.
there's this phrase in Portuguese that goes, Eu sou iluminado por Deus, and it means I am illuminated by God. And I've just always kind of felt that in my life, and I feel like I'm destined for movies, the movie industry. Um, I live in a town where there is no movie industry. I live in Omaha, Nebraska, so it's very difficult. But I'm gonna build the industry here from scratch, and I have very big dreams. I've always had very big dreams, but it's always been attached to movies. I feel like I've been placed here to make movies. I don't think it's very hard to describe. It's just something supernatural. I feel like I'm destined for movies. I don't know how else to explain
Hmm.
it. That's the story part I want to get better at. I want to be able to explain that, and I think the only way to do that is through a movie, probably.
Hmm. That's like your creative outlet, creating movies and creating films. And what you've already done on YouTube is that because I know that you publish a couple of lectures where you're doing deep dives into certain people. You mentioned Cleopatra, for example. I'm not sure if you also made a lecture on YouTube about her. But what else have you done aside from the deep dives into people?
Yeah. So the YouTube channel is actually it's meant to fund my future productions, like my future films. I wanna
Right.
my goal is to blow up the YouTube. And at the same time, while I'm doing that, study these great people of history and watch the narratives that replay throughout history over and over again, and then turn those stories, turn those lessons into a movie. Um, there's a it's very easy. It's quite easy to learn the actual film process, like setting up the right lighting, setting up the right camera settings, good sound, and crafting a story. But I think the thing that really makes the movie is the story element, and then having the lessons that actually resonate with human beings, and those are the lessons that are like eternal. So if I can just capture these lessons, capture these stories in the YouTube channel, which is why I want to do long form podcasting, then I'll
Hmm.
be able to put those lessons into a movie and capture them in their most true sense. And that's the vision I have for my life. I think that's what I'm destined to do.
It really sounds like the concept of telling a story is really deeply embedded in you, and that everything that you're trying to aim for is to tell a story. So you mentioned becoming better as a speaker or a public speaker. You want to set up a movie industry in Nebraska, and you are gaining the skills in order, the practice and the skills to both publish and create. So everything seems to be pointing towards telling a story. What is the story that you would like to tell?
Um, I think it's the story of a founder. So,
Hmm.
it's the story of someone having an idea in their head and making that world in into reality. So let me give you an example. Steve Jobs, while he was making the let's do the Apple II, um, and let's do the Macintosh actually, because during the Macintosh he had a full team, he had a full headquarter,
This
he
is
had a
like in
full
the 80s, right?
yeah, yeah. I think Macintosh, I'm not exactly sure what year, but I'm pretty sure it's in the 80s. When he was making the Macintosh, most of the people, like the Apple people, didn't believe in him. Not the actual workers, but the board of directors. They lost faith in him because they were losing a lot of money on the Lisa. And so Steve Jobs is trying to make this dream that he has, this Macintosh computer, and he's trying to bring that into reality. But the problem is that he has friction with the real world because he's living in a world with the Macintosh computer while everyone else is living in the world without the Macintosh computer. And so he's able to bridge that gap between reality and the reality that he's trying to create by simply taking the action towards making the computer, even though the world is trying to stop him. And you see the same pattern in every great person in history. Before Henry Ford invented the automobile, everyone had horses. No one knew why anyone needed a car. Edison, everyone thought candles were always going to be the standard for lighting. Edison triumphed over that, and he saw a world, a different world, a completely new world where it was lit by electricity and the light bulb. And even people nowadays, like Elon, I remember Elon has these stories, and everyone, when he talked about reusable rockets, they just kind of laughed at him. They said, "No, that's we're not. We shouldn't aim for that." But Elon had that vision. He had that dream, and he was living in a world where reusable rockets were already a thing, and he's able to bridge that gap between reality and the potential of what could be like innovation. That's what I think true innovation is, something new and something that will change the world. And I think that's the story that I want to tell. That's the story that I want in my own life. And I think that's a story that the world needs because we've lost a lot of that. We've lost a lot of the innovative spirit, especially here in America. Um, we're not innovators anymore. There's a story from Arnold's biography where he talks about coming to America and everything feels huge and everything feels like opportunity. And I feel like immigrants that are coming here, sometimes they don't have that anymore. Not as many of them have that. And I think that's something we need back.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. One of the things you mentioned is that you feel that innovation is stagnating, specifically in the United States. How do you see that exactly? So so how do you see that stagnating? Since when? And what do you think we should do in order to boot that up again?
Right. Um, I think the best example to explain this would be physics. There from like the beginning of the 1900s, we didn't even think there were smaller particles than the atom. We thought the atom was the smallest thing. Then you discover electrons, protons, neutrons. There was a point where protons and neutrons were the exact same thing. They didn't even know they were neutrons. And so between like 1900 and 1945, there was just this huge leap in physics. And even after that, when the Cold War was going on, um, there was a lot of innovation in physics, all the way until 1968, where the quark was discovered. And after that, it was just sort of stagnated. In the past 40 years, there's been no real advancement or utility that theoretical physics, has brought to humanity. You have the discovery of the boson Higgs field. You have string theory, which seems to be going nowhere, seems to hit a dead end. And you have a lot of people who are they're publishing things that aren't revolutionary, and
Hmm.
it's been years. Eric Weinstein has this saying that if you look at America in 1980 and right now, the only thing, and you take away the screens and the fashion, nothing would have changed. And he's really got a point there. So, um, to the second part of your question, where how do you fix that? I think it's by changing the story, by telling more stories and the right story. Um, I think it's about inspiring innovation and inspiring, in a way, like crazy, insane people to do crazy, insane things, and not suppress those people because those are the people that change the world. And I really do believe that.
Hmm. Hmm. That's a very interesting way of looking at it, because I think what you're pointing at is so when you're talking about innovation, you are talking about discoveries being made in the scientific field that have led to either a new field or a drastic change in the way the technology works. Is that a fair summary of what you just said?
Yes, as long as it's in an upward way.
So the one question I would have then for you specifically, because if we talk about innovation and then specifically about the last 40 years, you could make the argument that you have internet, you have the electric cars, although electric cars already existed over 100 years ago with these very old batteries, and somehow we decided to go back to gasoline cars. But regardless, the technologies that have been created, for example, by Tesla, Elon Musk and Tesla, and the rockets that you already laid out by SpaceX, those are very, very clear innovations. Um, and pretty much, if you look at the technology today versus technology from 40 years ago, it's a drastically different world. So if you would ask me, if you look at that, and if you would ask me the question, did we innovate over the last 40 years? I would say, put two pictures next to each other from 1980 from 2025. And those are two very, very different worlds in a technological sense. Um, how do you look at that in terms of strictly innovation?
Right. See, I don't think there hasn't been innovation. I just think it's all been in the same field. There's been no
Right.
innovation in
Okay. Yeah.
physics. So it's like I was saying before, you take away fashion and you take away screens, and you're left with a very similar environment. Even the things you were saying, like electric vehicles are like they're powered by batteries and they have screens in them. And you were saying we had electric vehicles before even, so It's just very, without screens, the innovation would be very minimal and the world would be very, very similar. I think the rockets are great, don't get me wrong. I
Hmm.
don't think rockets are going to be what's going to make humans interstellar. I think rockets are a backup plan, and I think Elon Musk knows that. Um, we might get to Mars, sure, but it's going to be very hard to get outside of the solar system just with propulsion techniques. And I think that's where you need
Wait,
advanced.
what do you mean when you say rockets are a backup plan? What is the primary plan then?
Right. I think the primary plan should be theoretical physics. So, um, the reason Elon Musk is hurrying so much because he wants to get to Mars, and a lot of people believe this, is that the Earth we've harnessed the power of the sun. We have nuclear weapons that could destroy all of us very, very, very quickly. If one person launches, it's not the most unlikely scenario that multiple nukes get launched, and suddenly you have a completely different Earth. Um, the reason these people want to go to space, at least in my opinion, and there could be many reasons. Humans aren't like perfect. We're all flawed. But in my opinion, I think the reason these people want to get off Earth so much is because they know that our time here is it might be limited. We don't know when nukes are going to go off, but they're here and they have the capability to destroy us. So the best case scenario, at least for me, is even in an inspiring way, to go to space, to go to the stars, to um, expand humanity past Earth. This might be our birthplace, but it doesn't have to be where we have to end up. And I think Elon knows that like propulsion techniques, rockets might get us to Mars, but I don't think it's going to be the thing that makes us interstellar.
So pretty much the argument that you're making is the fear of being destroyed on Earth is the thing that is driving us to go to other planets.
One of the things, yes, I do believe so.
Right. Yeah, because that does align to some degree with what he said. Because if you ask yourself the question, is the time on Earth infinite? Are humans always going to be on Earth? The answer to that is with a 100% certainty. The answer to that is no, because there will come a time where the Earth will get destroyed. That will happen, whether it's 1,000 years from now or 1 billion years from now or longer. That is happen. That will happen.
Right.
So for that reason, the way that Elon Musk laid that out, for as far as I understood it at least, was in order to decrease the chance for humanity to go extinct, we need to go to different planets, because then if one planet goes away, then at least we have a couple of other planets left. That's the whole idea. So it's like creating a spider web where every connection point is a planet where humans exist and can travel to each other. And that's pretty much the whole idea, to decrease the chance of humanity going extinct, which will happen with a 100% certainty at some point in the future if we decide to just stay on Earth. Well, so that aligns a little bit what you said. I wouldn't personally. I wouldn't look at it from a perspective of fear of going away if we stay on Earth. For me, it would be more like a visionary thing. You want to build a society. Well, I'm not sure if you want to build a society on multiple planets, because then you can be way more. You can just do way more in a way on a way larger scale. So I think that's primarily was driving the idea behind that. It's not necessarily fear; it's more like vision to build.
Yeah, I think this is kind of what I was saying, where humans are messy. Like humans are not
Mm.
perfect, and we all have different things motivating us. So uh, I always go back to history. I'm a huge history person. But everyone who's done something great in history had multiple factors driving them. And I mean, think about like Steve Jobs. I always go back to Steve Jobs is one of my favorites. But Steve Jobs was, yes, he was driven to build a better, like he was building a bicycle for the mind. He was building the computer. He was
Hmm.
innovating. He wanted to see a better world. But at the same time, and he's said this later in his life, he was trying to win the love of the world. And that's like a fear of not being loved, because he was given up when he was very little by his parents, and he was adopted by these other people, but it's always left sort of a mark on him. Same with people like Walt Disney. Walt Disney, when he was young, he was beat by his dad, and so he escaped to this world where everything was just imaginative, and the animals around him could talk. And yeah, when he was making Disneyland, he wanted to bring that imagination to the world, but at the same time, he was driven by that fear of escaping his childhood in a way, escaping his dad and going into this new world. So I think it's always different factors that play into um, the motivations that drive someone. And I'm not so sure that we can always be motivated by a positive thing. I think we need both of those in a lot of cases, and it's just about making sure that we're aware and we're conscious of it, I would say.
Yeah, it's not just a positive thing. I agree with that. It's not just the thing of wanting to make it better just for the sake of happiness. It's because I don't believe there's such a thing as 100% happiness. It's also you want to build, you want to protect the thing that you have. You want to build so the thing that you have becomes larger or becomes better or more productive for the people around you. You want to do all of that to make sure that you yourself and the people around you benefit from that and therefore can prosper in their own way and in return become more productive themselves. And therefore you get a society that becomes larger and does better things, provides more value. Um, that's a piece of vision, and I think that what you said earlier for Steve Jobs and also for Elon Musk, I think it makes a lot of sense that they live in a world where the products they're inventing already exist, because they are the visionaries, right? They are the people that think about products, that if those products do not exist yet, and you tell people about those products, they will tell you it's a bad idea, right? Everybody likes a phone with a physical keyboard on it. Nobody wants a piece of glass in their hands, referring to the iPhone. And we both know how that worked out. Every smartphone in the world right now is based on the original iPhone design. It was built on that. But back at that time, well, not by everybody, I suppose, because you had people who were very excited about it, but there were also generally people who were very skeptical about it. For example, on a security level, they thought that BlackBerry was the thing to have for a business. Yeah, BlackBerry not far not much later after the iPhone launch, they were not the company they were before. They imploded quite a bit. So yeah, it's very interesting these personalities and the way they think. And that idea, I really like your idea. The idea that they are living in a world where their products already exist. What do you think? What does it take, you think?
I've read a lot of biographies, and in all these biographies, it's the same story over and over again. Um, it's the same character, the same person, the same narrative. And so there's a lot of things that it takes, but there's a few principles that really they all go through. I would say it takes a lot of it's shaped in your childhood, depending on what struggles you go through, where how you grow up, um, and sort of like what relationship you had with your parents. A lot of these people tend to have harder fathers and very kind mothers who taught them and nurtured them. I think that's a very interesting thing, but I think a lot of it is just this drive to create. Um, it's just this work ethic that's like no other. This just wanting to do more, this wanting to be more in the world. Um, and it might be that fear of just wanting to prove yourself, which is quite sad, but that fear coupled with a really imaginative mind and a tremendous work ethic is what makes most of these people the people that they are. Um, so it's like positives and negatives, but if you want to dial it down to one thing, I don't know if you can. All of these people, they have the same story, but they're all unique in their own way.
Have you read the biography of Elon Musk?
I've read the
It's
one by Walt
the
Isaacson, yeah.
Yeah, he's the same writer that also did Steve Jobs, I believe.
I have read that
Also
one as
written
well.
by Walter. Yeah, yeah. What? what really? So I have it at home, but I didn't read it yet. The Elon Musk specifically, the Steve Jobs one also, by the way. I have them both standing next to each other. Both didn't touch them yet.
Oh wow,
But specifically
you
about
gotta
the
read
Elon.
them.
Sorry.
They're great. You gotta read them. They're great.
Yeah, I've heard quite a bit of beautiful stories about them. Um, I believe also, if I'm not mistaken, his name is Walter Isaacson, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So I believe he also he for a certain period of time he followed Elon Musk quite literally, following through everything. You know, walking next to him through his factories, through his meetings, through everything that he did, just to get an idea of who the man is as a character and what he does, and to get a feel for his patterns and the way he deals with certain situations. And that's the perspective that he brought on that biography. So it's not just based on public knowledge or interviews or media or anything like that. He literally spent a lot of time together with Elon Musk. And I'm not sure if he did the same with Steve Jobs, but I can imagine that probably the same process went in there, yeah?
Yeah, yeah. He was actually he was one of the people visiting Steve Jobs at the hospital when Steve had cancer.
Okay. Okay, so that part is also in the book.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What are some of your, so specifically about the Elon Musk one, what are some of the things that really stood out to you about the Elon Musk biography that you might think or you might say that are not really public knowledge or that many people might not know right now when they, for example, look at Elon Musk, you know, how he's in the media or how he is on X. What really stood out to you?
Yeah, Elon is one of a kind. He's just a one of a kind person. It's hard. He's got an incredibly high IQ and he's just a genius ever since he's a childhood. I think one thing that a lot of people don't know about him is that he is sort of his theological perspective on or his philosophical perspective on life, and you can really see it a lot in his childhood. When he was a kid, he read just he was another thing you see about great people, by the way, is they're all voracious readers. They all read a ton, and Elon was one of these people. As a kid, he just devoured books upon books and shelves and upon shelves. Um, and one book that he talks about, which had a very big effect on him, was this book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where it's essentially a religious book, but it talks about how we don't know we can't know where we came from because we're not asking the right questions, and we don't know how to ask the right questions. And so I think this was a very big motivating factor in Elon's life because he's looking for the right questions and he thinks that we'll find them um, out in space, I think. That once we're able to innovate and create more, we'll finally be able to ask these questions that we don't even know what the right questions are to ask. Um, so I think that's very interesting, and it puts him in a sort of agnostic viewpoint on religion. But I think that's something interesting about him that people don't really know. Yeah.
What else really stood out?
He displays a lot of he's a very good manager. Um, he's a very good manager at his companies. His employees work all day. There's not really any exceptions. If you're at SpaceX, you have to be the best of the best. This is actually what I want for my company here at Munoz Studios. I just started it a month ago, so right now it's just me. But I know later in the year when I'm looking to expand, I want to hire only the best of the best, the A-team players, people who are willing to be at the office 14, 16 hours every single day, and I'm going to be there right alongside with them. And you see this a lot in Elon's life and Steve Jobs and Edwin Land, who invented the Polaroid camera. These people, they have these people, these A players around them with no exception, and they're so obsessed with their vision and their goal where they just work all the time, every single day to create something that's beautiful and that's world changing. And I think there's a lot of beauty there and there's a lot of inspiration there that most people just can't fathom. Uh, it's just it gets your competitive instinct going, and I think that's very cool. A very cool thing that Elon does that is displayed in a lot of people in history as well.
You mentioned that you want to expand later this year and that you want to hire the best of the best, the guys that will stay and gals that will stay 14, 16 hours per day on the job just to make sure that what's happening is the best they can potentially do, they can possibly do. Do you have a specific vision on how that will look?
All right. So my company right now is called Munoz Marketing, and in the future we're going to be called Munoz Studios. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this. I know a lot of people may comment on this, but I want to build the structure of a movie company using a marketing company. So right now we're just a marketing company. We do everything that has to do with YouTube. So we have three services. We have set up organic YouTube growth. So we'll start your YouTube channel, we'll grow it, we'll analyze it, and we'll do all the editing, filming, scripting. Our second product is YouTube ad campaigns. So we'll run ad campaigns for you. We'll track all the analytics, conversion rates, and we'll get those up and going for you. Those are very trackable, so it's very easy to sell. And then our third product is podcast services. So if you want to start a podcast, we have gear, we have cameras, we have editors, and we'll take care of it for you. Um, and that's sort of my short-term vision for this company. But the idea is to build a team of editors, scripters, and storytellers that are proficient in marketing, but our main goal is going to be to make movies, and we want to make movies about these great people in history. So the idea is to build that team and then slowly incorporate the movie element and use the marketing company to fund it. Um, that would be the long-term vision. I haven't actually shared that with anyone, so if you have any comments on it, I'd gladly take them.
Yeah, I'll definitely ask a couple of questions. So the idea is that you have the marketing company and you will grow the movie company beside it, or it will be like an element within the marketing company. It will be the same company.
It'll be the same company. Um, I'm just
Right.
gonna
Okay.
build the team, the infrastructure, and then later we'll do movies on the side, but that'll be our main thing later. It's just there's no
No.
movie industry in Nebraska, so if I try to start a movie company right now, it wouldn't get funding. It wouldn't. There would be no money pouring in. It would just be very, very, very difficult. So if I can get this marketing company going, it's easier to sell. I can build the same infrastructure, and then later, I can turn it into a movie company, just when we have income flowing in and cash.
And what are the practical steps that you're gonna take? So from this moment forward, you mentioned that in a couple of weeks you're gonna have a pitch to a couple of clients. What are the practical steps that you're gonna take in order to grow it? How does your roadmap look?
Right. Um, I think the most important thing is just about finding the right people. I have a couple clients right now, and I have a pitch in a couple weeks towards businesses. So I'm looking to get a few more clients there so that I can start hiring.
And what do you sell them now?
Just the YouTube products I was talking about, YouTube, organic marketing, YouTube ad campaigns, and podcast
Hmm.
setup. So if anyone's listening to this and needs that, I'm your guy. Um, but I think the most important step after that will just be finding these A players, these diamonds in the rough, finding the people that want to work all the time for this vision. I know I can't be the only person that is so fascinated by these great people of history, that's just obsessed with these stories and these meta narratives that repeat over and over again. I know there has to be more people out there that are inspired by these people, and I just need to find them because once I find them, I think it's just one of those things where we'll click and we'll be able to grow the company from there in no time. But it has to be the right people. An A company cannot have B players in it. B players will only bring the company down. This is why I think Elon is big on cutting people out a lot of the times, like at Twitter, where he just cut, is it like 80% of the people there?
Yeah, I
Um,
believe even 90, something like that.
yeah, yeah, just a
Hmm.
huge amount because he just won't tolerate any B players. He has to have A players around him because he himself is an A player. And I think if I just make myself that A player, that hard worker, that sort of visionary person, I'll just those people will just come into my life and I'll be surrounded by A players who can match that and keep me competitive, keep me going, and really drive me to do those big things in the future.
How do you know you're ready?
This is actually a fun story. I'll tell you a fun story. So a couple months ago, I watched this YouTube video, and the YouTube video was talking about different income brackets, and it was getting really cynical. It was like, oh well, people at the bottom have no opportunity. They can't get to the top. It's not possible. What's going on? And it was just this really cynical take, putting people that don't have a lot down, giving them excuses. And I'm not saying the system isn't rigged against them. It very might well be. I'm not so sure. I don't know too much about that. But I wanted to test this video out. So I left Nebraska and I went in my car to Idaho in another state, and I said, I'm going to live in my car and I'm going to see how fast I can build up my life from scratch.
Mm.
So I moved to this new city. I knew very few people. Um, and I just started applying for jobs. I started studying at the library, and I was just living in my car the whole time. I had some crazy experiences. I met some crazy people. I jumped off a rock into a lake, which was pretty cool. It was like a 25 meter or something.
Hmm.
And I just embraced this nomad, just free lifestyle. And at the end of a month, I did it for a month. I got two jobs. I got a job as a housekeeper and I got a job as an editor. So one that required previous skills and then one that didn't require previous skills. But I proved my point that even if I lose everything, even if I lose my company right now, the worst that can happen is that I go back to my car and I enjoy this great life. After
Mm.
that, there is no fear. There is no, oh, I'm gonna go bankrupt because I very much could go bankrupt. And if I do, I go back to the car. And I know that the worst of the worst, I know that the worst that can happen isn't that bad. And so I think the only way to really do something is to have no fear, to just go full in, knowing that the worst that can happen is just zero.
Right. So your answer is take a risk that is well calculated, but that might be very beneficial. And if it goes wrong, if the risk doesn't work in your favor, at least you have a stable basis to fall back on.
Yes, mitigate your risk always. Um,
Hmm.
One of the greatest business tips from history is to always keep your costs and expenses as low as possible. That is actually the biggest factor of what makes a company great. If you can keep your costs low, um, like your expenses low, even during a depression, there's nothing that's going to be able to sink your company because your costs are low. One of the biggest factors of what makes a big company go out of business or announce bankruptcy is that their costs get too high. They sort of live on that luxurious lifestyle, and that's like the rise and fall of empires as well. They're sitting on gold, and well, they fall apart because they lose that ambition that they had at the bottom.
Hmm. Well, I can imagine that your costs are going to be pretty high. So if you're going to be aiming for well, in your words, the A-level people, I can imagine those are not going to be cheap. So your costs are not going to be on let's call it a regular level. So there
Yes.
will be a challenge there.
I think I think there's um I think there's different meanings of A-level people. There's
Hmm.
like A-level in terms of experience and like work like the work that they produce. So you can think of an A-level person as someone who's been an engineer for 40 years and has the best designs for a building, or you can think of an A-level person as a random 20-year-old that wants to work 16 hours a day and continuously exponentially gets better every single day. And the first one is going to be very expensive, yes, because they're already very good at what they do. They have lots of experience and they've been doing it for a lot of time. But the thing is, the second person is actually very cheap because they haven't made a name for themselves. They don't have a reputation. They just have a dream and they want to work hard. And those are the people I'm looking for, the people that I can grow with and learn with. And uh, it's if I just find those people, I think those are going to be better for the long term as well, where you're building a company that's young and hungry and innovative, and then you can scale to that bigger corporation
Hmm.
level where you can then spend a little bit more on those people that have the 40 years experience or whatnot.
Yeah, it makes sense. This is the whole idea of do you want to buy knowledge or do you want to buy ethic? And what you're pretty much saying is that you prefer somebody who's hungry and who wants to learn and who wants to grow and who wants to put good products on the table and who wants to prove themselves. one of the problems, so it's not really a problem, but one of the things that you have to be really aware of with with those kind of people, and I agree, I generally love those as well, because they're very shapeable. They are hungry to learn, so they also learn from their mistakes, right? They will never try to. I'm speaking in absolutes right now, but they will take they are able to take criticism and become better instead of assigning the blame to someone else. So those people are very valuable. I really love them as well. But one of the challenges with them is that they can get bored really quick. So you have to make sure that they stay engaged, that there is that there is a clear vision for the future for them, not just for the next 3 months, but probably if you ask them the question, where do you want to be in 5 years? There is a very good chance that with those kind of people that you are aiming for, that they will have a defined vision. And then the question becomes: do you have what it takes in order to help them reach that vision? Do you have what it takes to keep them engaged and motivated and challenged? That is a challenge.
Hmm.
How are you dealing with that? So if the answer is how do you keep them interested?
Right.
What would your answer to that be?
Um, I'm gonna go back to history again. There's this man named David Ogilvy. Have you heard of him, David Ogilvy?
No, I don't think so.
He was a marketer in the 1900s.
Hmm.
He did campaigns for people like Rolls-Royce, Hathaway, Dove, and Shell Oil, and he was a like
Hmm.
one of the big marketers of this era. He's actually known as the father of advertisement. Um, but he has a lot on this because when he was very young, he worked at a restaurant in Paris, and it was one of these like five-star top class restaurants, and he always looked up to this guy named Chef Pitard. Chef Bitard was this excellent leader, and he was the best chef in the kitchen. And he gets a lot of lessons from this guy that he later applies to his marketing company, Ogilvy and Matter, which grew to like this crazy, huge marketing company. And one of the leadership techniques that he had was to just put in the hours and um, always look to be the best in the team and to get these people and align their visions creatively. And he says that
Right.
um, at the end of the day, that's what brought him success. It was getting a group of people around him, working all the time pretty much towards his goal, and then aligning other people towards that similar goal. Um, for me, that goal is telling the stories of the greatest people in history, and I just need other people to align with that vision, the long-term vision, the 10, 20 years into the future, where we're still telling the stories of the great people in history. And if I can just get people to align with that goal and then work all the time in order to stay competitive, not fall behind these A players around me. Like I said before, be the A plus player, let's call it that. If you can be the A plus player, and you're surrounded by all these other A players, um, I don't see any problem with them leaving. Of course, people will always leave. You always have churn rate, but um, long term wise, all these people, they're going to be motivated by that vision and by your work ethic and the passion that you have for
Hmm.
that.
Okay, there's a couple of things I would like to connect here because you mentioned a couple of times that you are greatly inspired by the great leaders from the past, the great people from the past, and that you also read their biographies obsessively. So that's one thing. You also you are clearly quite ambitious, very ambitious, I would say, on the entrepreneurial front with setting up the movie studio and building your current marketing company. And what your answer just now was, and correct me if what I'm saying is wrong, but what your answer just now was is that you want to create a vision that people can partake in. So therefore, they know what they're doing it for, and therefore they know what their path of growth is going to be, and therefore they will stay challenged for the time that they will be with your company. What I'm trying to figure out right now is how these elements combine with each other. So your interest in the great people from the past, how does that link to your setting up your movie studio? Because I know that you have an interest in telling stories. You've brought that out. You are a storyteller, and this is also what you want to grow in, and that links perfectly with movies because movies do nothing else than show stories and tell stories and tell human experiences. But how is that specifically linked with the great people from the past? Is it more that they inspire you to reach that level of greatness yourself in your ventures, or is it more directly linked to the stories that you want to tell? I'm not really seeing the. I don't feel like I have the full picture of that connection between these two yet. Could you shine some more light on that?
Right. I guess the best way to answer this would be to give you some examples. Have you
Hmm.
seen like Oppenheimer or
Yes. Yeah, I have.
Oppenheimer, The Social Network, the new Bob Dylan biopic that just came out? I have a whole list of them on my phone. I'm obsessed with these biopics as well as much as biographies. But all these people in history, all these great people, the exceptional ones, they all have the same story. Um,
Hmm.
and it's like I was saying before, where it's the same story over and over again, repeated throughout history. And so, if you can capture the essence of a founder, of that person who innovates, um, the only way to truly capture their essence is in the way of the story, because the reason why we look up to these people is because of they're an example of human triumph. And who doesn't love a triumph story, a triumph movie, a triumph narrative, a triumph biography? It's all sort of connected together, and I want to express it in my way of movies. Of course, we can do biographies as well. We can do YouTube. It's all going to be part of that one mission of telling the stories of the greatest people, the greatest, most exceptional people in history. Um, I just want my focus as CEO of the company in the future to be on movies and sort of navigating that movie art, at least for the next decade or so.
Hmm. Yeah, I just want to go back to a little bit what you said earlier. Um, because you mentioned that if you take this risk and if it doesn't work out, you have like your stable base to fall back on. So it is a risk, but it will not be absolutely devastating when it goes wrong. You know, you will find something else. You continue. It's actually very interesting. I think it's by now a couple of years ago, but there was a documentary by a very successful, I believe he was a businessman, a very successful businessman, multimillionaire, and he wanted to prove to the world that poverty is a mindset and that poverty is not something that you are stuck with. And the way he did that was by, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, because this is already a while ago, he either gave away everything or he just sold his company and he put everything in a savings account somewhere or whatever. Anyway, he didn't have money anymore. He didn't have a car anymore. Didn't have a house anymore. Started living on the street. He wanted to prove the point that you can pull yourselves up at your bootstraps, you know, and go do something, even though you have nothing at the moment. And I believe within a year time, he built up a internet company again, um, which had at least $1 million in revenue. Once again, from absolutely nothing. That's from living on the street with $0, with absolutely nothing, no family, no friends, nobody that you can crash with. You know, you're living on the street in a cardboard box, and then within a year, going back to a company and having your first million in revenue. I believe he was also doing marketing, but I would have to double check, and I also don't remember his name.
I do know what you're talking about. It's those stories are so inspiring. It's it's mind blowing. I think the point there is just like the worst is never as bad as you think it is, and you shouldn't let it stop you from taking action.
Hmm. Yeah, well, there's always things you can do. Um, like it might be easy for me to say, and it might be easy for you to say as well. I'm not. I don't have that experience, and maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I can't imagine a situation in which I would have nothing anymore. You know, no money, no work, no nothing, and I just accept that, and I just don't do anything about that. I don't see that happening. You know, go to do some voluntary work at different places, get some free courses, get, you know, connected to your community, try to help your community, try to get something together, you know, when you can have your first job, no matter how low paying that is, but build up from there. Yeah, once again, it's very easy for me to say that because I haven't been in that position, so I have to be really careful about making these kind of claims. But if we're talking strictly about the mindset, I can't imagine a situation where you would just be like, okay, I have nothing anymore. I have no family. I have no friends. I have no money. I have no car. I have no house. I have absolutely nothing, and I'm living outside. Okay, this is the way it's going to be for the rest of my life. We're just gonna go with this. That sounds like an impossibility to me.
Yeah. I was yeah, it's sort of a it is sort of a mindset.
Hmm.
I was struggling through something a couple weeks ago, and I was just it might have been like a couple months ago now actually. It was just very tragic time in my life, and my friend looks at me and he goes, "You just remember, you like, I know things suck right now, but you can't see the full picture. Only God can see the full picture." Um, and I think that's something to always remember, that you don't know why things are happening to you, but you can either believe that the world is against you, or you can believe that um, something will come of this. And so, um, let's say you do lose your house or your girlfriend or all your money. Um, you have no idea what's going to come from that. It could be the biggest blessing of your life, and you don't know it yet. But in order for it to be the blessing of your life, you have to at least think that's a possibility in the chaos of potential of the future. Um, so I think immediately assuming that this is the worst thing that's happened to you, like if you lose everything, like great, you have nothing to lose. Um, keep moving, you know? Um, that's the only advice I have there. I don't know.
Yeah, then the risks you can take are also larger to some sense.
Very much. You cannot take a big risk if you're, well, I'm not going to say you can't, but it's going to be harder to take a big risk when you're a Fortune 500 company than when you're a small company in Nebraska who's not even in debt yet. And, you have a lot more freedom there.
That's just a lot more to consider. You know, if you have a wife and children at home and you have your mortgage and you have your car and you have your responsibility to your job and whatever, you can't just take any risk just for the sake of it. You have to really balance that. And I think people in general are they scale differently in terms of their willingness to take risks, which also has to do with, for example, I believe their level of neuroticism. If we're talking strictly about the big five personality traits, higher people that score higher in the trait neuroticism tend to be more risk aversive, and if you score lower on neuroticism, you tend to take more risks more easily. Those are also people that can become more impulsive with making decisions, either financial or with pretty much anything else. So there is a scale of risk taking, but I
Yeah.
agree.
What inspired you to do the podcast? Like, because is it like a risk for you?
Oh, that's quite a segue that you're making. No, it's a good question. Yeah, it's for sure it's a risk. It was well, to some degree it is still a risk, because every single conversation might bring something forward and cause you trouble. That's literally what happens. Might be it might be either something that the guest says, might be something that I say, it might be just their reputation, it might be any number of things that can cause it might even be the subject that we're discussing. It might be anything that can cause trouble. Can cause trouble to your family, can cause trouble to your profession, can cause trouble to your environment. It can do that. So yes, it was definitely a risk to start the podcast because to some degree you are opening yourself up to the world, and also the way that you're thinking, you're opening that up to the world. And per definition, that means there are people out there who will probably listen at some point to you and will figure out that they don't like you that much, and that anything can happen. So that was definitely something I had to think about. And for me personally, the way I had the idea for the podcast already for quite a while, but I've never started with it until August 24, 2024, that is. But I've already had it for like 3, 4, 5 years, and it's like inspired by guys like Joe Rogan and Lex Friedman and Andrew Huberman, and these kind of great names within the podcasting industry. I've
Yeah.
never started it because I always had the idea of, okay, I would like to have a podcast, but what would the goal of the podcast then be? Would I be the solo speaker? Would I invite guests? And if I invite guests, how do you find those guests? How would it look practically? How does video editing work? How does audio editing work? I don't have a multimedia background, so pretty much that means there's a whole bunch of skills that I would have to train in order to do podcasting properly, at least if I'm doing it myself. So there was a whole bunch of things that I had to get in order to start. And then in August, I had the opportunity to start one and to have some interesting people on. And I took that opportunity. I didn't, it was a quite impulsive decision on my side because I had the opportunity. I saw that there were people available that had the intention of talking on a podcast. And I was like, okay, you sound like an interesting person. I would love to hear your story. I would love to talk with you. And I would love to hear what you have to say. So I actually made the podcast. It sounds a bit weird, but I made the podcast not for myself, but I made it to have those conversations with these people that I already had contact with. Marien Graaf, the guest on the first episode, was one of these people. I made the podcast literally for them because the moment my contact with Marien started, the whole idea for the podcast and how it was technically set up was wildly different. It was not a thing that would have. It was not. The idea was not there is going to be a podcast that is going to be weekly from now on. That was not the idea. The idea was, okay, you run a program on your phone, I run a program on my phone. Those programs they record our voices at the same time, and in the meantime we're gonna leave those phones as they be because they record our voices, but we're gonna see each other in a screen and on a Zoom call or on a Teams call or something like that. And at the end, you're gonna send me your file. I can combine these two files into an audio track. I can I can optimize them where needed, and then that's gonna be published. It was a very rudimentary way of approaching it, with no idea of making it a show that is weekly. But then more people started coming in. And then all of a sudden, there were a couple of people lined up. And then all of a sudden, this had to become a regular thing. So it kind of grew from there, to be honest. That's how
Hmm.
it went. But back to your question with the risk, it is a risk. Because once again, you're putting your thoughts out there and for the world to see.
And your time
So you have to be
too.
very, yeah, 100%. So you have to be very aware with what you're saying. At the same time, in my case, in respect to my family, both to my family, my friends, and my job, which pretty much goes for anything. At the same time, I really believe in the beauty of having great conversations with people who have interesting stories to tell, either because they are experts in their respective field or because they just have a personal story to tell, like you do. Either way, that's a beautiful thing. Just listening to people and listening what they have to say and learning how to look at the world through their eyes. That's I'm not overstating when I'm saying that's absolutely a wonderful thing, that I didn't have this experience before, in the sense of having these kind of conversations on a regular level, with all kinds of different people. I think I just had like maybe one or two people, probably my brother and maybe one friend and my wife,
Yeah.
of course. So that makes three that I would have really deep conversations with. So this is a great opportunity in that regard. So that's worth the risk, 100%.
It sounds like you have like a big passion for it. Like it's something that you love to do, even with all the work that it takes.
Yeah, it's funny. It's not even work. I mentioned this. Well, obviously, it is work, right? You're having to edit everything. You have to record everything. You have to research everything in advance. Of course, it is work to some degree, but it doesn't feel like work. It's very very fun to do. And even right now, with you, and I mentioned this a couple of times already before. The funny thing is, when you're in a conversation with someone like you and I are right now, you don't pick up everything that the other person is saying, or the way they look out of their eyes, or the way they behave, or their the things that makes them special. You don't really notice that per se in your first conversation. For me, the beauty is I can have the conversation, and then after the conversation, I can look at the conversation as a viewer, and then really pay attention. So it's like to some degree, it's like having two conversations, two different experiences to the same conversation, which is very interesting.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
you're learning at the same time. That's kind of what I was referring to at the beginning, where um, with public speaking, you first like you practice it and then you watch yourself over and over again. What can you do better?
Mm.
You do it again. What can you do better? Again, what can you do better?
A whole lot.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, yeah, and you said it yourself. You do this not like it doesn't even feel like work to you. You have a natural proclivity to do it. Um,
Mhm.
that's another thing I see with a lot of great people. They just um for them, even if they weren't getting paid to do it, they would do it anyway.
They'll still
Um,
do it. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, just
Mhm.
because they're like geared to do it. It's just what you do. There's no other way to live. There's no other way to live your life. It's just you go to work and you do it because that's what you do. That's what you do. It's like breathing oxygen. Um, Walt Disney before he was this Walt Disney, he still did cartoons. He just did cartoons because he loved drawing and he loved perfecting that craft. And um, that's what I like to see, and that's what I'd like to see more in society. People doing things instead of doing nothing. I think doing nothing is actually the biggest risk because time is your most valuable resource. And so if you're doing nothing, you're just wasting your most valuable resource when you could be doing something, even if you don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe to make that practical, is to ask yourself the question, where do you want to be in X amount of time? You don't have to make it 10 years forward, do it however far you can look into the future. Even if it's just a couple of days or a week, who cares? Start with that. It's fine. Start small. Don't take too much on your fork at the very beginning. But ask yourself the question, where do I want to stand in the next amount of time? Okay, that provides you an answer, right? I want to be this. I want to have a relationship. I want to have more friends. I want to learn a new skill, a new language. I want to know how to speak Japanese. Whatever it may be. All right, fine. Okay, so you want to learn a new skill within now and the next year? Fine. What kind of resources can you use? What kind of steps can you take that are measurable, that you can track over time to see if you're improving, to make sure that that goal is going to be reached after 1 year? Fill in those milestones and then ask yourself for every one of these milestones. So for every one of these important moments in the timeline, if it's a year, let's say every 3 months is a milestone. Okay, what kind of specific steps do you need to take every single quarter of the year in order to make sure that you hit those milestones? Make it practical, make a list, and then check it off after you're done with it, just to make sure that you're on track. But that provides vision, and it provides a way to actually, if you don't think about it in that way, you will want the world and you have no idea how to get it. And then you are stuck. And then the thing that you mentioned comes forward. Time is ticking away, but you're not taking any steps. Take steps, but define them first. Make sure you know what you're going to do and when you're going to do them, and then do them.
Well said. That's 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 it right there. Just take the steps, find the goal, figure out the steps, and then take them. It's really interesting because on my I started a podcast on my YouTube channel, and I just read the biographies and I go over them, and
Mhm.
a lot of times it's these lessons and they just repeat over and over again, and they're really simple lessons. They're really simple lessons like make a goal, figure out the steps, and then take the steps. It's like success and like the entrepreneurial path, it's not complex, it's just hard. Um, but at the same time, it's really easy. So it's almost paradoxical because um, like the lessons that repeat over and over again, they're very simple. You just have to implement them into your life, and that's the thing people struggle with. Because there's a lot of distractions in the modern world. But those distractions are the same things that give you the most amount of resources. So you can use YouTube as a distraction, or you can use it as a resource. You can use
Mm.
ChatGPT as a distraction, or you can use it as a resource.
Yeah, and it's not just distractions that are holding people away, because that is certainly a thing. I 100% agree. It's also the easy thing, right? Just scroll a couple of videos on YouTube or TikTok, and yeah, that's another evening that went by. So 100% distractions are definitely a core element in the problem. But it's not just distractions. Doing a deep dive into so what I just laid out, creating those milestones and creating those tasks, doing a deep dive and actually asking yourself the question, what do you want to reach at the next amount of time? That requires real thought. It requires real effort. And it'll probably put a mirror in front of you that will tell you that you're very incompetent right now, because else you would have it right now. So you have to you have to do things that are not easy. You have to learn, you have to grow. And growing is not without pain. And defining that you need to grow comes after the realization that right now you're not competent enough to do that. And you need to do something about that. And that realization is very hard. It maybe is also one of the reasons that people don't generally take criticism that well. Although there's obviously a lot of things that go into that, including tone and the way that the message is being given. But in general, you could make the argument that people don't take criticism that well because it's very hard to hear, you are not good enough. You're incompetent. You should be better. You should take some steps in order to improve yourself. And that's pretty much, in this case, you're looking at yourself, and the idea is to find what you need to do, whatever that may be, in order to reach that point that you want to reach. And that is scary, and that takes effort, and that takes a lot of self-reflection.
Right. It's interesting because that's also like a driving factor, like one of the fear we were talking about earlier. It's that fear of not being enough. That's like one of the motivators. And
Hmm.
then the opposing, like the positive side of that is, um, I can be enough if I just take these actions. So you have like I can be enough, and then you also have I'm not enough right now. And um, some of the greatest people, they just never get rid of that I'm not enough. Some of the highest achievers, they just feel like they're not enough. This is another thing why another it's very interesting that um, there's very little correlation. Well, there's correlation up to a certain point, but after a certain point of wealth, there's a little correlation between I guess that's sort of like happiness and well-being and money. Um, so like I think it's up to like 110,000 where it does correlate happiness and well-being and money. But after that, it's just very little correlation, which I think it's fascinating because the people at the top, they just always have this feeling that I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, and you need more and more and more and more. Um, yeah, I think that's interesting. What do you think about that? What do you make of that?
Well, the only thing I will say is it's very good to take a step back and appreciate what you have. Because I don't know what the number in Europe would be. I think the number would be a little bit lower, but the 110,000 makes a lot of sense because if you have nothing, if you have no money whatsoever, and if you can't feed yourself or your children or your partner or whatever, yeah, you're gonna be pretty damn miserable for a lot of time. So you need to be able to at least pay for your bare necessities, food, water, energy, the means to travel, to your work, to your family, whatever, those kind of things. You need to have that. Then the next thing you need to have is a good house to make sure that everybody has a good place to live. A good house needs furniture. You need to go out to restaurants every now and then. You need to do fun things every now and then because else everything is just stale. So you need to have these things in your life with your family in order to live properly. Well, not live properly, but to live in a way that provides you with the means to be happy and satisfied and not be miserable because there's something fundamental missing in your life at that moment. And you need a certain amount for that. So apparently the sweet spot over there is 110. And if you go over that, well, if people get richer, they might certainly be happy, but it's not with the same correlation. Um, and when it goes very high, and I don't have that experience myself, so this is just how I see it, not from own experience. But I think in general, if you would ask me the question, okay, if the situation is that people that are very successful and very rich, they have the feeling that they constantly have to perform or else, and they don't take a step back to enjoy what they have, then I would say there is a balance that needs to be found. And the balance that needs to be found is the balance between future success and stability and happiness in the moment. Happiness in the moment should not be 100%, but it should not be zero.
Yes, that's where religion comes in for me. Um, Religion is where I find that sort of happiness and well-being, and where I find that balance with this drive and ambition. Um, because at the end of the day, drive and ambition can be good or bad. Like I'm sure Adolf Hitler was extremely driven and motivated. Um, but it's also about where it's pointed at and how you can find how you can like properly how you can properly think of work in your life. Have you read the Bible?
I haven't. No, aside from a few verses here and there, I haven't fully read it.
Okay, so there's this great book in the Bible, the Old Testament. I would definitely recommend it. It's not very long. You could get it done in like probably like 20, 30 minutes. But it's called Ecclesiastes, and it talks about it's pretty much all about work, and it just talks about it's a man toiling. It was written by Solomon. Most people are pretty sure, but Ecclesiastes pretty much talks about how all your work is essentially meaningless because there's this verse that goes something like, "You come from dust, and when you die, you will return to dust." And
Hmm.
that's why it's important to always remember that, even in the pursuit of greatness, in pursuit of um, achieving great things and helping humanity. At the end of the day, we're all dust. We came from dust. We return to dust. Um, and so that I do think it's important to be grateful and to be just conscious of it. Because we can't always be happy. Um, we can't be happy all the time. But you can definitely have that knowledge of you can definitely be like have that sort of peace with what you're doing and
Hmm.
that aim towards something good. But yeah, Ecclesiastes really did help my work a lot before because before I was just working all the time, constantly, just trying to get by in life, not really thinking about anything. I was just kind of lost. After Ecclesiastes, I was like, okay, my work, it means nothing, but it also means everything at the same time, and it's what gives me purpose. But at the same time, it really it doesn't matter at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, it's almost paradoxical, but that's where you find that sort of peace. Um, at least in my opinion, I'm those are one of the things I'm still trying to learn to articulate and just um, learn how to speak better about a lot of biblical things. But Ecclesiastes definitely helped me a lot in with my work life.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's all about finding the right balance. You shouldn't be 100% happy in the moment, but you shouldn't also be 0% happy in the moment. The truth is somewhere in the middle. So you want to find a balance between sacrificing now in order to have a stable and prosperous future and and not being miserable right now. And at the same time, you also have to take care of your other, of your partner. So if you are married or if you have a girlfriend and you're living together with her, the only thing you're doing is you're focusing on your career 100%. Yeah, that might be it might be fun for a few weeks, maybe even a few months if she's patient. But yeah, if she doesn't get attention, then that's not going to be a good thing. I can tell you that.
Very much. Oh, that's actually a good segue into it's very interesting with relationships, people in history. This is something I'm also trying to figure out. I'm not
Hmm.
exactly sure how to balance my work with um like a relationship. It hasn't really worked out for me.
Hey, are you married or do you have a girlfriend?
No girlfriend, not married. I'm 20.
More than enough time.
Hopefully, yeah. Some of my friends are getting married, so it's getting there at some point. But
Mm.
one thing I see in history is that a lot of these great people, their relationships either don't work out or they work out because she's part of the vision, she's part of the business. Um, you can think of like yeah, this guy named David Senra, he has this quote where it's like you either need a supportive wife or no wife at all. And I think that's been sort of difficult. I'm not sure if that's true. It's just something I'm still figuring things out there. Um, yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to balance that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Speculate. What do you think the answer is?
I would say it's something like, do you know the director Christopher Nolan?
Yes.
I would say it's something like that. He has a kid and he has a wife and his wife is the producer to all of his films that he's a director on. And so they work together, they schedule time with their kid, and their house is right next to their office. So they can like their commute time is extremely small so that they still have time at home. Um, Even though they also have times where they're just working constantly. But I think the answer might be something like that, where your wife just has to be in on the vision. She has to be supportive of it. Otherwise, I don't see any way it worked out. Um, or it would work out.
Well, everything is a balance. So I am married and I've known my wife for 14 years,
Wow.
13 and a half years. And she is actually also a producer. She co-produces this podcast together with me. So she does the editing of the actual conversation itself.
Wow.
I do the
That's
editing of the things like the intro and the outro and those kind of things. So we work together on it. It's incredibly fun. And for many reasons we've decided to go there. But let that be for what it is for now. If you would ask me the question, how do you see a good stable relationship with, well, in our case with a woman as part of your entrepreneurial journey, and how do you balance those two together, then my answer would not necessarily mean that she has to share your vision, not per se, but she needs to understand it. You need to make sure. Well, first of all, first of all, one of the elements is effort, right? How much effort do you put in your work, and how much effort do you put into her? How much time dedication? That might be a better word. How much time do you spend on work, and how much time do you spend on your wife? If you spend 100 hours a week on your work and 2 hours a week on your wife, that might
Ye-
be a problem. That might be a little bit too little. And in the short term, that if there's moments in your life where that happens, and you communicate with each other, and both of you know exactly why that is happening, and both of you are in agreement that that is okay for the agreed upon period, then that is fine. As long as there's no black swans on there that you don't know about, but that's a nuance that's not really that relevant for now. At least not in the answer for now. But you need to talk and you need to communicate. You need to make sure that you have a balance that you're both happy with. So questions that you could ask yourself is, do you think we are spending enough time with each other to be happy with the status quo for the next coming months, for example? If the answer to that is yes, well, you can get a couple of things still clear if that yes is truly a yes. So you can ask, for example, do you want to do more fun things? Do you have a feeling that maybe a very good question is, do you have the feeling that you're missing something in our current relationship that I could do better? Questions like that. So you can be absolutely sure that your relationship is sound and that there's no black swans hiding under the rug. If the answer to the question is no, if she's not happy with how it's going right now, then you have some balancing to do. And I would say, ask questions. Like, okay, hey, what are the things that you are missing? Is there something that you would like me to do that I'm not doing right now? Questions like that, and figure out a way to, with the answers that she is giving you, figure out a way to balance your relationship with her. Because I believe if I was in a position where my relationship with my wife was not balanced, it would deeply affect me. Not just with the podcast, but with the way I interact with other people, with the way I do my job, with the way I interact with the world, with the way I interact with the salesperson at the supermarket when I go there for shopping. It fundamentally changes the way it affects the way I interact with the world gigantically. It's not a good framework to operate on. Having that rich in your relationship, you need to have that balanced. It's absolutely crucial.
Hmm. So it's about like communication and balance.
Well, everything is communication. You need to be absolutely sure that you are on the same page as your partner. 100%. If there are, so I'm gonna steal a little bit of Jordan Peterson's mindset here. But if you accumulate over the course of 10 years. If over the course of 10 years you have a small little fight every single day about who's doing the dishes, about, who's taking out the trash, about who's doing the shopping, about who's cleaning the plates after dinner, stuff like that. And every single time you don't have a talk about that, and you don't adjust the pattern, and you don't become better, that means that after 10 years you have thousands of problems that accumulate. And that's a big dragon. And that will lead to things that you may not like. It will literally lead to the point that you're hating your partner, right? You will have fundamentally different views of how you want to live. You will want to focus on your career. She wants to focus on something else. It will not be a good relationship. It's 100% communication, and not just communication. You need to have the willingness to do a deep dive into each other's needs and to figure out a way to make sure that those things happen while at the same time incorporating your own vision into it.
What's it like working with her on the podcast? Like, is that vision sort of aligned together?
So the podcast was providing a problem because, and this was still in the time that it was audio only, because we started with video in episode 18. So before that was audio only. And I said before that pretty much when you talk about, for every hour of recording, you need to do around 3 hours of post-production. Kind
Oh,
of.
wow.
Yeah, so that was, you become better over time. So I'm not sure the number is always the same, but my gut tells me it's kind of 1 to 3, something like that. So that means that if you do a 2-hour conversation, then your research, your post-production, and your publishing, and your writing, and everything, you're creating the thumbnails, everything around what you're doing, that time investment is around 1 to 3, something like that. With video, it became a lot more. But anyway, the podcast was providing a problem. And the problem was, I have a full-time job, plus the podcast, plus a couple of other things at the side that keep me busy, including a side business. So that means that my time is running out. There's not a lot of time to spend with my wife. And that's not a good thing. In the short term, it was good, and she agreed to that because she knew that the focus to grow the podcast was there. So we talked about that, and that was okay. But it's not a long-term thing. I can't do that for 10 years and just leave her, out to dry. That's not going to work. So we needed something, especially because I really wanted to get the video component off the ground, and I expected, which turned out to be absolutely right, I expected that would drastically increase post-production. So that would mean, with the little time that I have left, there will be no more left. So the problem will only grow. So that was the problem. This is where my wife comes in. So my wife has a hospitality background. She doesn't have a multimedia background, but that is something that she's very interested in. She's a very creative person. She used to draw as a young kid a lot. She's a very good drawer. She can write very beautifully. So her typography, I think it's called, is quite gorgeous. It's very, very nice. But she doesn't have any multimedia experience. I was thinking, okay, on my side, there's a need for time. On your side, there's a need for knowledge and experience and creative expression. Why don't we link those? Because if you start working on the podcast, that means you're building your skills with editing, with post-production, with preparing, with the equipment. So you learn some hardware as well. In time, you will start using new systems, audio inputs, all those sorts of things. You will have, for example, the software Final Cut Pro on a Mac or anything else. You start using these dedicated pieces of software. And I mean, if you can use Final Cut Pro, for example, and you're very, very good at that, 100% there's jobs available that will hire you straight away, because that's a very valuable skill. So it provided her a good opportunity to build those skills and to build something for herself, and maybe also to turn this into a business for herself, where she has like a not necessarily podcast, but like a production kind of company, right? Like a multimedia production kind of company, which is a beautiful thing to build. So that fit really well. So on my side, that means less time effort because I don't have to do all the post production myself. On her side, it means she can get the skills and experience that is needed in order to grow in her field. It's a beautiful combination. So now we work on that. That gives her the time. That gives her my time that she wanted to have, and it gives her also the skills that she wants to build. And on my side, it gives me more time to do a lot of fun things as well on the side. So it's a beautiful combination all around, and this was literally a win-win scenario. Everybody became happy with this.
Yeah, I would say that that's sort of something that I'd be looking for. It would be that sort of that just like creative hustle together, or that
Hmm.
win-win, where you both understand each other very well, and then you both get what you want out of this project. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I like business too in general, just because you're able to connect with people, um, and you're able to. I mean, when you think about like the olden days too, like we didn't always have like business was always built off of relationships and reputation and who knows who. It wasn't like we
Mm.
didn't always have social media. It was about like your reputation was the most important thing in business, and so that's like a relationship thing. It's building relationships out in the market, helping people, having a good name. Um, it's been a bit lost with social media in the new world, which is it's very interesting to see where it's going because there's not as much repercussions on social media as there are in real life. You can be whoever you want, you can change into whoever you want. No one has to know who you are if they don't want to. Um, where you can't do that in real life. It's got to be you. So that's it's very interesting. That's one of the reasons I like business a lot.
Yeah, and it's all about finding the right balance.
Very much something I'm working on for sure. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I think. Do you think balance is also different for a lot of people, like different people?
The question that you should ask yourself, I think, is what is the thing that you value the most?
That's actually a lot of what I've found in the Peterson Academy. It's just a lot of people wanting to share ideas and those ideas you immediately apply into your own life, hopefully, and then that makes all of our lives better. And we're all in a community striving upward, which I think is just the coolest thing. And it really does feel like a community in there. It really does feel like a community. It's crazy. There's a lot of like online communities, but this everyone in there really does feel like good friends. They all want the best for you. Everyone's giving advice, even if it's hard to hear sometimes, which is often the best advice. Um, and yeah, it really does feel like a community. People really want to help.
How long have you been on the Peterson Academy already? Have you been from the very beginning, or are you a relatively new student?
I was there since the beginning. Yeah, I've done maybe 9 or 10 courses. Um,
That's
maybe
way more than me.
I just yeah, I did a lot of them. I stopped for a bit, but they're quite interesting. I'm
What's
big
your
on
favorite?
I really like the cosmology course because I'm a physics nut. I love physics. Um
Right.
yeah. That's why I keep talking about interstellar, making humans interstellar.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So I really like that one, but on a more like broad sense, Jordan Peterson is just a um really like great guy to follow. So his Nietzsche course and his personality course were really, really good. Um, he's one of a kind, crazy high IQ. He's in a way a lot like Elon, um, just very unique, very high IQ. Um, that's probably one of the things that makes them both unique, and they're just very smart people.
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to at least to worth ethics, and the drive to build and to create, I believe that is also very high with Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson, I think, is a bit more agreeable than Elon Musk is.
For
So if
sure.
you're talking strictly about the big five, and maybe also a bit more neurotic, So a bit more open to emotion, which is logical because the guy is a professor and a psychologist. So that kind of makes sense. But yeah, 100%. You've done way more course than I have. The one that I have is the Introduction to Nutrition course, and just for fun, I've started with the I've started. It's already like 3-4 months ago, I think. But with the what was it called? The one from Jonathan Pageau.
Symbolism, Christianity.
Yeah, that one.
It's crazy how like I don't know. There's some of the stuff he says really hits, and then some of the stuff he says it's like I don't know how you got that there. I don't know how many people would get that there. But like certain concepts like he talks about the like Christmas and the Christmas tree and how the light at the top of is the or the star at the top is the light. And then you have a hierarchical structure going down to the presents, which is hidden until Christmas, which I think is really interesting. But then he does the same thing with Santa's sleigh, and he says it's Rudolph at the top, his nose, that's the guiding light, and then a hierarchical structure back to the sleigh. And I guess it's sort of the same concept, but I never would have thought of that. I'm not sure how many people would think of that. Um,
Yeah, I don't think you will unless you spend a big chunk of your life on researching that specific field that he is
right.
in. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was really interesting as well. What really stood out to me about Jonathan Pageau was conspiracy theories actually.
Oh, really?
And the thing that he was laying out was that there is truth in conspiracy theories, and he gave two examples, and these are very funny examples. Example one is with the elite in the world being populated by lizard people, and the other one is by the 5G towers that were spreading the coronavirus, the COVID-19 virus.
Hmm.
Those were two conspiracy theories that were quite the first one is I believe is yeah, you still hear it every now and then. But the 5G towers, I remember that quite vividly from 2020 2021 because in the Netherlands there were a couple of 5G towers that were burned down, by people that broke through the fence, poured gasoline on the bottom, and then lit them up. So it was actually a conspiracy theory that a lot of people took very seriously. But back to
Oh,
Jonathan Pageau, what Jonathan Pageau laid out um, is okay. If you look at the conspiracy theory, the idea is that a 5G tower spreads the coronavirus and therefore the 5G tower is bad and needs to be burned down. That is the conclusion. And that conclusion is obviously a bit silly. But there is a structure and an idea under there that kind of makes sense. Because one of the questions that you can ask yourself is, would the impact that we have felt during the COVID-19 situation be at the scale that we experienced if there was no internet? That is one of the questions you can ask
hmm.
yourself. Because a lot of the information that was being spread on social media, in the news, on television, that was spread through the internet. So, to some degree, you can therefore make the argument that internet contributed to at least the symptoms that we felt as a result of that situation, of the COVID-19 situation. So therefore, to some degree, internet is responsible for the impact that we have experienced. And therefore, to some degree, the 5G towers have to be burned down. That's like the idea,
Just a
taking the
little.
idea too far. But that is that little element of truth that has exploded into something absurd. But if you look at the source and where it came from, kind of makes sense. And the same for the lizard people. So I'll just tell it very shortly. The the mortal enemies of humans, the animal in the garden with Adam and Eve, are lizards. And lizards want to eat us. Lizards don't want to make us prosper. They don't want to help us. They want to eat us. They want to take advantage of us. So the idea there is do the people at the top of the food chain, do they want to help us or do they want to eat us? Do they have our best? Do they have our best in mind? And that question is being answered with no, just like with snakes and with lizards. So therefore, the top are lizard people. That's like
It's
taking it too far
very
again. But
interesting. Yeah.
it's this little thing that's in the center of a conspiracy theory that kind of makes sense if you look at that, if you look in that direction.
Yeah. It's like, oh wow, that's very interesting. I've never thought about that. Um, it would be like a sort of truth just surrounded by things that are like they might not be true, but people cling on to the truth part of it. And that's
Hmm.
why it's popular.
Right.
I've
Yeah,
never
one of the questions you can ask yourself is if you hear a conspiracy theory, whatever it may be, if you zoom out of it and if you look at the patterns where it's coming from,
find the
what
truth.
is the truth that you can find?
Interesting. Do you believe in a lot of conspiracy theories?
I mean, they're fun. I mean, they're fun. And if I'm interacting with a person that believes very strongly to a certain conspiracy theory, I will definitely have a conversation with that person. I find it highly interesting. I find it also highly entertaining. So that is definitely a conversation that I will have. But it's not something that I'm chasing or something. It's not like I'm going to Google like, hey, what is the conspiracy theory of the day? And it must be true. No, I don't think that's good for your focus that much. To be honest, I would rather focus on what I can do to be productive for myself and for my environment. That sounds like a way better deal than exhausting yourself with stories that may or may not be true that much.
Hmm. Yeah. I like I guess I like talking about aliens, like UFOs, but other than that, I'm not hugely aware of all the conspiracy theories out there.
Ooh, that's a good one though.
It is a good one, but I think I like it because of um it just has a huge impact in physics and space travel and um it would just it's just very interesting to think about. But at the end of the day, like we don't know, and so we can only like work to to know in the future. Um, and so I think focusing on the work aspect of getting to like to the point where we can know, I think that's more interesting than discussing whether like what the probability of it being true or not is until we have more data.
What do you think? Are there aliens walking among us?
Um, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know. I watched this one video about Atlantis recently and how there's like there used to be full maps of Atlantis and like some of the great philosophers talked about Atlantis in detail. And I know that's a big conspiracy, but I think it's interesting that UFOs are like coming out in the ocean. They're coming out of the ocean at like insanely high speed. So I think it would be cool if like there was an alien civilization underwater and they're just way too far advanced that they don't want anything to do with us. So
Yeah, I heard a podcast with Joe Rogan a little while ago, and I don't, like I said before, I don't tend to focus that much on conspiracy theories, but he was talking to someone, I have no idea who it was, but he was talking to someone about, specifically about having aliens on Earth. And apparently there's some very convincing evidence that the answer to that question is yes. And one of the examples that he gave, I believe he was talking to a military pilot who was flying somewhere and who, well, while he was flying at insane speeds, like I don't know how fast those things goes, like 2,000 kilometers an hour, 2,500, something like that. Yeah, there was like an object that was apparently shooting past him so incredibly quickly, with like a velocity that would like break humans apart. You would turn into mush as a human, um, which would then be, I don't know, like a UFO or something like that. But anyway, it's those kind of stories with people in very serious positions, in this case a military pilot, that then bring out these kind of things that they've seen. That are, and apparently there's also, I'm not sure if I'm remembering this correctly, I would have to look it up, but apparently there's also video material of it.
yep.
Um, some pretty convincing video material of it, which is, well, I mean, if a guy like Joe Rogan has a couple of guests on that are very serious and they claim that they've seen stuff that is not normal and not human, that is at least worth looking into.
For sure. It's yeah, it definitely is worth looking into.
Hmm.
I'm surprised the knowledge is kind of hidden. You'd think it'd be almost open sourced, or I don't know. You, I don't know. I don't know what to think of it. I don't know what we would even do if we did like have full evidence for it. Um, Nothing, there's a chance that like nothing would change. We would just continue everyday lives. There's not much we can do about it. Maybe it would put a little bit of fire under us.
Well, might be a very interesting time coming up because I know that Donald Trump, after he becomes president again, he wants to open up
Yes,
some books, including the JFK assassination book, or
very
files, I
interesting.
believe it's called. So might be some interesting things coming out, at least enough to keep
Absolutely.
people busy for a couple of years.
I'm very excited. Yes, I'm very excited about all that. I'm excited to see what's going to happen, what new directions the country is going to go in.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I'm just interested. I'm curious.
yeah, wild times, wild times.
Yeah, we are living in wild times. I'm grateful to be alive, and I'm grateful that I get to be a part of this part of history, because we're making history, and that's one of that's amazing.
All right, dude. I think we are nearing towards the end. Is there anything that we didn't discuss that you would like to bring up? Anything that you would like to mention?
I don't think so. I think we had a good conversation about a lot of different topics. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Um, yeah, it's just fun having these conversations with people in PA, people around the world. I don't think I've met as many people around the world as I have in just the past month, just by being online and talking to people, and it's been a little bit eye-opening.
Yeah, sounds great. I hope this conversation will help you a little bit, especially after seeing it with the public speaking part. So let's hope you reach that specific goal. But I agree, it was a very fun conversation to have with you, Nick. Thank you very much. All the best also on your effort with growing your marketing company, and good luck with the pitch that's coming up in a few weeks. And I'm certainly gonna keep my eye out to see what you're gonna make once you take that step into the video production part with yeah, the film directing or the film creation. That might be very interesting. Keep me posted on that. I'm looking forward to see what you're gonna build.
Thank you very much. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Nicolas Munoz. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing or following the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. Thank you for listening, and take care.